Welcome, night travelers. You've tuned into the midnight broadcast where the shadows talk and secrets come alive. Tonight, we've got another story waiting for you. So find your place in the darkness and let the story begin.
The fog rolled in faster than usual that night, creeping down the streets and covering the town like a thick, heavy blanket. It was dense and strange, thicker than I'd ever seen. It swallowed up everything until you could barely see a few feet ahead. And the silence. It was unsettling. No wind, no hum of distant traffic, nothing. Everything felt off. It was so quiet. I couldn't even hear the old town clock striking the hour. It was like the whole town was holding its breath. My name's Lily, and I've lived in Brookhaven for 2 years. It's a quiet town, the kind of place people go to get away from the noise of the city. I rented a little house at the edge of town, right where the forest starts. The fog always seems to stick around a bit longer there, lingering in the trees and across my yard. I usually like it. Makes the world feel softer, like a dream. But tonight was different. Tonight, the fog felt alive. I was closing up the bookstore where I work. It's a cozy little place tucked between a cafe and an antique store. As I locked the door, I noticed the fog already creeping under the entrance, curling along the floor like icy fingers. I shivered and pulled my coat tighter, stepping out onto the sidewalk. I was supposed to meet my friend Sophie at her place. She only lives a few streets over, but with the fog this thick, I didn't know how long it would take me to get there. The cold hit me like a wall. The air felt wrong, heavy, thick. The fog wrapped itself around me, muffling my footsteps. It made everything seem far away, like I was walking through some strange, quiet dream. Even the streetlights looked dim, their glow weak and sickly, like the fog was swallowing up the light. I walked faster, my breath coming out in quick, frosty bursts. The town was completely silent. No cars, no voices, just the crunch of my boots on the frozen ground. I rounded the corner towards Sophie's street, and that's when I felt it. This sudden, cold chill running down my spine, like a warning. And then I heard it. Footsteps. They were faint, but clear, echoing softly through the fog, coming from somewhere behind me. I stopped, my heart pounding. I turned around, squinting into the thick white mist, but I couldn't see a thing. Just more fog, swirling around me like something alive. The footsteps stopped too, like whoever was behind me had frozen in place. I tried to laugh it off. It's nothing, I told myself. Just my imagination. Everyone in town always says the fog can play tricks on your mind, make you hear things. So, I turned back towards Sophie's and kept walking, but my nerves were on edge now. Every little sound felt way too close, too loud. I kept thinking of the warmth waiting for me at Sophie's, her cozy living room, a hot drink, the laughter we'd share. Just a few more blocks. But then the footsteps started again. This time they were louder, closer. I froze, my heart racing. The footsteps didn't stop. They kept coming, slow, steady. Every step crunching through the frozen ground with a strange patience. I held my breath, turned around again, my phone shaking in my hand. Nothing. Just fog. Thick, swirling, endless fog. But I could feel it. Someone was there. I couldn't see them, but I knew. It was like a shadow, just on the edge of my mind, just out of sight, but unmistakable. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice barely breaking the silence. Nothing answered me, just that thick, heavy fog. I swallowed hard, my breath coming faster now. I turned back to Sophie's house and started walking faster, my footsteps quick and uneven, echoing down the quiet street. The footsteps behind me matched my pace. They were following me. Panic flared and I broke into a run. My legs burned and my breath came in short, ragged gasps. The fog only seemed to grow thicker, like it was closing in around me, trying to trap me. I could barely make out the shapes of the houses lining the street. They looked distant, unreachable, like shadows. I glanced over my shoulder, and for a second, I thought I saw something, a figure, barely visible, standing in the fog. It was tall, unnaturally tall, with long, thin limbs. It stood perfectly still, but I could feel its eyes on me, watching. I stumbled, almost fell. I didn't wait to see what it was. I sprinted the last few steps to Sophie's house, nearly collapsing onto her front steps. I banged on the door, my hand shaking so hard I could barely make a fist. "Sophie!" I yelled, my voice trembling. "Open up! Please!" The door swung open and Sophie's face appeared, her expression full of concern. "Lily, what's wrong? You look... I don't know," I gasped, pushing past her and into the house, my whole body still shaking. Something was following me. I think I saw something in the fog, something tall. She shut the door and locked it, her face going pale. "Something? What are you talking about?" I took a shaky breath, trying to calm down. I thought someone was following me. And when I looked back, there was this figure. It was tall, with these weird, long limbs. Sophie's face went white. "A figure? In the fog?" I nodded, suddenly feeling silly. "Yeah, but it's probably nothing, right? People say the fog can mess with you." Sophie didn't say anything. She walked over to the window, pulling the curtains aside just enough to peek out. Her face looked tense, her eyes scanning the street outside. "What is it?" I asked, feeling the fear creep back in. She let the curtain fall and turned to me, her voice barely a whisper. "You said it was tall, with thin limbs." "Yeah. How did you—" Sophie's eyes darkened. "People have seen it before, Lily. Not often, but enough. It only comes out when the fog's thick like this." A shiver ran through me. "What do you mean?" Sophie hesitated, like she didn't want to tell me. "They call it the Watcher. No one knows where it came from or what it is. But every few years, someone sees it in the fog. And when they do..." She trailed off, her voice faltering. "When they do? What?" I asked, my voice a bare whisper. Sophie's face was tight with fear. "People disappear." A cold dread filled me. "Disappear? What do you mean?" "They just vanish," she said, her voice shaking. "They see the Watcher, and after that they're gone. No one finds them. It's like the fog swallows them up and they never come back." I felt sick. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. "You're saying that thing, it's real?" Sophie nodded, her face pale. "If you saw it tonight, you might be in danger." I didn't know what to say. The room felt too small, the air too heavy. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows, thick and unyielding. I could feel it, like a dark presence lurking just beyond the glass. "We should call someone," I said, barely getting the words out. "The police or..." Sophie shook her head. "The police can't help. They never can, once the Watcher has seen you." Her words drifted into silence. Then, From somewhere outside, I heard it. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming closer. Sophie heard it too. Her eyes went wide, and she backed away from the window, her face pale with fear. The footsteps stopped, right outside the door. There was a pause, a long, heavy silence. Then, a knock. Soft at first, but clear. 3 slow knocks, each one sending a chill down my spine. Neither of us moved. My heart pounded and I could feel Sophie's hand grab mine, squeezing tight. Another knock, louder this time. Whoever was out there wasn't going to leave. "Don't answer it," Sophie whispered, her voice trembling. "No matter what happens, don't open the door." A wave of fear washed over me as I stared at the door, the silence pressing in around us.
Lily?
The voice outside was low and hollow, barely a whisper, but unmistakable. It knew my name. I froze. I looked at Sophie, who was shaking her head, her face a mask of terror. Outside, the fog clung to the windows, twisting and shifting. I thought I saw something moving in the haze, a shadow maybe, or a face pressed against the glass. But when I looked again, it was gone. The knocking stopped, but the silence was worse. I could feel that presence still there, right outside the door, waiting. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Finally, the air felt a little lighter. Sophie let out a shuddering breath, her grip on my hand relaxing. Maybe it's gone. But as soon as she said it, something slammed against the window, rattling the glass. We both jumped back, terrified. Outside, the fog shifted, and I saw a shape, a face, pressing against the glass. The face was distorted, twisted, with hollow eyes and a mouth stretched into a wide, unnatural grin. Its features kept shifting, like it couldn't hold a shape. But those eyes, they locked onto mine, following me.
Lily?
The voice echoed in my mind, filling me with a cold, creeping dread.
Come outside. I am waiting.
I stumbled back, pressing my hands to my head, trying to shut it out, but the voice only grew louder, more insistent. Sophie grabbed my shoulders, her grip like iron. "Lily, don't listen to it. Don't let it in." But the voice was in my head, pulling me toward the door, making me feel like I had no choice. My vision blurred, and I could feel the fog pressing in on me, drawing me closer to the door, pulling me into the night. I fought it, breaking free, stumbling back against the wall. The voice faded, but the memory of it lingered, chilling me to the core. Sophie was next to me, her eyes wide with terror. "We need to leave, Lily. We can't stay here." I nodded, though I didn't know where we'd go. The fog was everywhere, and even if we made it to her car, we'd still be stuck in this nightmare. But Sophie grabbed her keys and pulled me toward the back door. "We'll go out the back. Maybe it won't notice." We moved quietly, our footsteps soft on the hardwood floor. The back door was just a few steps away, but it felt like a mile. Outside, the fog was thick and waiting, pressing close, like it was ready to swallow us whole. Sophie opened the door, and we slipped outside, the cold air hitting us like a slap. The fog was everywhere, wrapping around us as we ran, stumbling over the frozen ground, our breaths coming in short, panicked gasps. But the footsteps followed, echoing through the fog, matching our pace, closing in. I looked back and saw it. The tall, thin figure moving through the fog, its eyes locked on me. We kept running, but it didn't matter. It was coming closer with every step, the fog thickening around us, blocking out everything else. Then, just as I thought we'd never escape, We stumbled onto the main road, the fog finally breaking under the streetlights. We looked back, but the figure was gone, swallowed up by the fog as it drifted back toward the woods. We knew the truth. The watcher in the fog was still out there, waiting, and it would be back. After we reached the road, Sophie and I scrambled into her car, barely pausing to catch our breath. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely get my seatbelt on. Sophie's face was pale, her fingers clenching the steering wheel as she started the engine. She didn't even look at me, just stared straight ahead, like she was afraid that if she looked away, the fog would pull her back in. "It's gone," I said, almost trying to convince myself. "It went back into the woods." Sophie didn't answer. She kept her eyes locked on the road, the headlights cutting through the last thin wisps of fog clinging to the edges of the trees. But just as she pressed on the gas, the fog started creeping back, rolling in faster than I thought possible. Thick, dark clouds swirled across the road ahead, covering everything, blotting out the light. "Oh no," Sophie whispered. "It's coming back." The fog seemed even darker, thicker than before, and it closed around us in seconds. The trees, the streetlights, even the yellow lines on the road faded into nothing but heavy, swirling grey. I could feel it pressing in on us, wrapping around the car like it was trying to swallow us whole. "Sophie, go!" I urged, my voice shaky. "We have to get out of here." She nodded, her face tight with fear, and pressed down on the gas. The car lurched forward, but we could barely see anything, just a few feet of road, and beyond that, only the thick, endless fog. Sophie gripped the steering wheel, squinting through the windshield, trying to keep us on the road. The fog twisted and turned outside the windows, like something alive. It was as if it knew exactly where we were, surrounding us, blocking out every hint of the world beyond. Every so often, I thought I saw shadows shifting in the mist, figures moving just out of sight. Then I saw it. A shape, drifting through the fog, barely visible. It was tall and thin, floating just above the road, keeping pace with the car. I felt a cold wave of fear rush over me as I recognized it. "The Watcher," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Sophie glanced over, her eyes wide with panic. "What are you talking about?" "It's following us," I said, pointing out the window. "Look!" She turned her head, her face pale. And there it was, that tall, twisted figure, moving closer, its long limbs stretching out through the fog, reaching for the car. It was gliding just above the road, almost like it was floating, its hollow eyes locked on us. "Oh my God," Sophie breathed, her grip on the wheel tightening. She slammed on the gas, and the car sped forward, but the figure stayed with us, drifting effortlessly through the fog, like it was part of it. "It's not stopping," I shouted, fear tightening my chest. "It's getting closer." Sophie's knuckles were white as she gripped the wheel, her eyes darting from the road to the figure floating alongside us. She pressed down harder on the gas, the engine revving as the car sped up. But no matter how fast we went, the Watcher stayed with us, keeping pace, drifting closer and closer. The fog seemed to grow even thicker, swirling around the car, blocking out everything except the figure. It was right outside my window now, its hollow eyes staring in, unblinking. I could feel its gaze piercing through me, cold and empty, like it was looking straight into my soul. "Lily, don't look at it!" Sophie shouted, her voice filled with panic. I tore my eyes away, but I could still feel it. That awful, hollow presence hovering just outside the window. It was like the fog had come alive, pressing in on us, suffocating us. The road became harder to see. The fog was so thick that the headlights barely reached past the hood of the car. Sophie was struggling to keep us on the road, her face tense with fear. "We can't keep driving like this," she yelled. "We're going to crash." But what choice did we have? Stopping meant letting that thing catch us, letting it close in on us completely. Then, suddenly, the car lurched as Sophie swerved to avoid something in the fog. I caught a glimpse of it, a dark shape standing in the middle of the road. But it wasn't the Watcher. It was another figure, shorter, standing motionless, watching us. "Sophie!" I shouted. "Look out!" Sophie yanked the wheel, and the car veered sharply to the side. We skidded off the road, the tyres spinning as we hit the gravel shoulder. Sophie fought to regain control, her hands gripping the wheel, her breaths coming in short, panicked gasps. "What was that?" she whispered, her voice shaky. I don't know," I stammered, glancing back. The fog swirled around us, thick and dark, and I couldn't see anything. But I knew the Watcher was still there, somewhere in the fog, waiting. Just as I thought we might have a chance, the fog closed in even tighter, wrapping around the car, until it felt like we were completely alone in some kind of dark, empty void. The headlights barely cut through it now, the beams swallowed up almost instantly. And then, out of nowhere, the figure appeared right in front of us, floating above the hood, its eyes fixed on me. I gasped, frozen in terror as the Watcher's face came closer, its twisted features pressing against the windshield. Its eyes were deep and empty, and its mouth stretched into a wide, unnatural grin that sent chills down my spine. Sophie screamed, slamming the gas pedal to the floor. The car shot forward, passing right through the fog and into open air. The figure vanished, but I knew it wasn't gone. I could feel it, lurking just out of sight, watching us. "Keep going!" I shouted, my voice shaking. "Don't stop!" Sophie nodded, her face pale and tense, and kept driving, her hands steady on the wheel. But the fog was relentless, thickening around us again, as if it was trying to pull us back. Shadows dancing in the mist, dark shapes moving in and out of sight, surrounding the car. I looked out the window and saw it again. The Watcher was floating alongside us, its hollow eyes staring in, watching our every move. No matter how fast we went, it was there, keeping pace, gliding through the fog like it was part of it. "Why won't it go away?" I whispered, panic clawing at my chest. "I don't know," Sophie replied, her voice trembling. "But we have to keep moving. We can't let it catch us." We drove through the fog, the road barely visible, the car speeding through the dark, empty streets. Every time I looked out the window, the Watcher was there, floating just beyond the glass, its empty eyes staring back at me. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the fog began to thin. The dark shapes faded away, the headlights cutting through the mist. I let out a shaky breath, feeling a flicker of hope. Is it gone?" I asked, barely daring to believe it. Sophie slowed down, her eyes scanning the road ahead. The fog was lifting, and the world started to come back into focus. The trees, the road, the streetlights, they were all there, solid and real. We shared a glance, relief flooding over us. We thought we'd made it. We thought we were safe. But just as we rounded the corner, the fog rolled back in, thicker and darker than before, swallowing up everything around us. The headlights went dim, the road disappeared, and the Watcher reappeared, hovering right in front of us, its twisted face pressing against the windshield. I screamed, covering my eyes, but I could still feel it, that cold, empty gaze piercing through me. Sophie tried to swerve, but the car wouldn't respond. It was as if the fog itself was holding us in place, trapping us. The watcher's face filled the windshield, its grin widening, its hollow eyes staring into mine. And then, everything went dark. When I woke up, I felt groggy and disoriented, as if waking from a heavy, dreamless sleep. I blinked, trying to clear the haze in my mind, and realized I was in my bedroom. But something was terribly wrong. The air was thick, heavy with fog that clung to everything, casting the room in a pale, washed-out color. It felt like I was staring through a dark veil, one that dulled every color and shadow. I forced myself up, an icy chill crawling over my skin, and stumbled to the window. Outside, the neighborhood was hidden beneath a dense, unnatural fog. My yard, the street, the entire area, all of it was veiled in this mysterious mist, hollow and lifeless. I searched for signs of life, any hint of movement, but there was nothing. The streets were empty, and dark shadows floated aimlessly in the mist. Where is everyone? A loud knock cut through the silence, echoing in the fog. I gasped, whirling around to face the front door. My heart hammered in my chest as I walked to it, each step heavy with dread. When I opened it, I was met by a frail old woman, her face weathered and lined with sorrow, yet her eyes held a strange gleam of excitement. She reached out and wrapped her thin arms around me, pulling me into a tight, almost desperate embrace. "Oh, thank goodness! Finally, someone from my neighborhood has come," she whispered, clinging to me like I was her lifeline. Her voice was trembling, but there was something off in her tone, something almost eager. "I've been here alone for so long, ever since the Watcher took me." Her words sent a chill down my spine. I tried to pull back, but her grip only tightened, her fingers digging into my arm as she looked into my eyes with a twisted smile. "But now, I'm not alone anymore," she said quietly, with a shiver of joy in her voice. "We can keep each other company, and maybe, if we're lucky, he'll bring more people for us soon."